So today what I'm going to do is fit the camshaft, and what I've got to do is find top dead centre because I haven't got the flywheel on. Now this could be tricky, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn the piston down and we're going to find out where its peak is. So you can see there's 2.21 millimeters. I'm going to turn it up and you can see it's negative, so now it's going up, 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 7, 5, 3, 2, 1, and then it's going down again. Did you see that? 2, 0. So there's -7, minus 0.07. Turn it a little bit. 0 over top dead centre and there. So the 0 is our top dead centre, and that's where we're going to leave it. All right. So now, going to go and get the camshaft. The camshaft in these 4-cylinder engines was remarkably good. I've never had one break. I've never had one wear out the lobes like they did on the V8. They sort of were made of chocolate. They go really, really well. And they've got a sort of nice little touches to them. Like if you've seen a 300 TDI for the pump, for the vacuum pump, it's got a double cam. So it's got a cam on here and a cam on there. But notice here for the fuel pump, you see it's an eccentric, if you see what I mean. An eccentric means it's a ring but offset. So you've got a steady lead and a steady fall off the cam. It's nice that. It's got a gear drive here for your oil pump and your distributor. And because these were for a diesel and a petrol, it drove the injector pump as well. They're very good. I mean, just looking at them, you can see there's no wear or there's nothing on them. If you're a bit unsure, just get a caliper or a micrometer and just check them. But the design was very, very good, because we'll come on to this later when we put the tappets in, or the cam followers. But I was chatting to a guy, a rebuilding guy, he's sort of long gone now, and he was looking at one of these engines. He said, oh, what a remarkably good idea the lifters were, like the cam followers. You know, it's got the round, like a bearing and a brass follower and then a tappet inside the block. He says, that's a very smooth operation, is that? Like Sade. But it worked, and it worked very well without any problems, until you started to pull them to bits and find out you're going to rebuild them and you put some cheap parts in. Let me put this cam down and I'll show you about the tappets. Whenever I take an engine apart, I always keep the tappet, the screw and everything in a plastic bag with a number on, so it goes back in the right order, so all the parts wear together. It's not really wise to mix and match. But this is, I won't take the screw out because you know what a screw looks like. But there we go. This is the tappet. All it is this is a tube that sits inside the block, right? And it's held in by the screw that I'm not going to show you because it's a secret. But then it's got this little brass lifter where your push rod sits in, and that's allowed to move with the rock of the engine, if you see what I mean, rock of the rockers, so when this is pushed up the angle will change. Now for some strange reason, which I haven't really found out yet, but I probably will one day, some of them are marked front, or some of them have got a little tiny F on there. Now I've never quite worked out why, but you can see there's a distinct difference in the casting from this side to that side. I wonder if that's something to do with it. What I was going to bring to your attention is this, the roller. Now check all the rollers, make sure there's no pits or anything like this, but I have seen on quite a few occasions people build engines up, and there were some of these, and I think they're still kicking about, that actually go sort of like octagonal, like a 50 pence or something like this. They actually wear flats on them because they weren't hardened. So you're running these on the cam, which wears the cam, and then it wears this bit in here, so you have to replace just about everything. They're very soft. Now sometimes you can get away without changing the cam, but sometimes it's a bit unwise because I don't like putting new parts on things that might be suspect, like the cam, for example. Now I'll just put this back in its bag and I'll tell you about something. If you ever have to change, by any unusual circumstances, the camshaft on these 2.5s or 200 TDIs or 300 TDIs, you can actually change the camshaft without taking the head off. Because usually with those lifters and things like this, all the little rollers and things like that get in the way. You can't pull them out. But if you take off the rocker shaft, take out the push rods, take out the engine and turn it upside down, you can actually take the cam out. You know, if you take the front cover off, well, you've got to take it off anyway, but you can take it off without disturbing the head gasket and things like that. Guess how I know that? Anyway, we had a job once where somebody had put an oil seal in, and I think they put it in with a chisel or took it out with a chisel and chipped the surface where the oil seal ran. So I had to change the cam. But like I say, we just took the engine out. When the beauty about a 300 TDI, and when Mike was working here, we were like a good team. We could change an engine in about 3 hours. Take an engine out, change the cam, put it back in again, 3 hours, job done. Kind of easy, really. I mean, obviously we've got cranes and forklifts and things like that, but it's possible to do. So there we go. So less of this rambling. Those are the parts that we're going to fit. Hopefully today we can get round to fitting the timing chain as well, and we'll call it that section. So let's dig in. So what I've done is I've turned the engine slightly on its side so I can get access to the cam bearings that was fitted at the shop, which I've now decided to make my own tool to fit them myself. Now, one thing I found that if you buy sort of the off-the-shelf cam bearings for these, quite honestly, they don't always wear. It's the front one that's a bugger that wears out. Because when you put your timing belt on your TDI, it tends to pull the belt across. 300 TDIs pull that, cause grooves in here, and then you lose oil pressure. So sometimes I just get away with just changing this front bearing. This one's bigger than the rest. But the three other bearings that's in here are exactly the same. So I might make a bushing tool, because if I have to replace them, it's easy. But what I was trying to get to is this. The bushings in here, the cam bearings, are actually from Turner Engineering, because the aftermarket bushings need reaming where the Turner ones don't, and quite a few people have caught a crab on that one and put knocked the bearings in, and then found out that they can't get the cam in because it needs a special reaming tool. That's like chicken's teeth to find. But Turners have come up with like a split bush that's pre-reamed, ready to put in, and they're brilliant. All you've got to remember is there's an oil hole or two in the cam bushing, and you must orientate it round, because if not, you'll bugger up the cam and starve the crank and whatever of oil pressure. You don't want that, so you've got to orientate the bushing right. Now, this was a problem in 200 TDIs. I don't know what happened. I don't know, I've got something in the eye. On the 200 TDIs, the rear camshaft bush was notorious for turning. I don't know why that was. And I still never work it out. But again, how many 200 TDIs do I see nowadays? Not that many. Right, let me go and get the cam and we'll pop it in. Right, I don't know where I was with the video because I got a bit sidetracked. It's all lubed up. It's all ready to go. Now, we're going to be very careful about fitting this because we don't want to damage the bearings. They are only lead. Right, so we're going to gingerly fit this in here, trying to support it all the time. You shouldn't have to hammer this or bang it or anything. keep it square. And this is why I've turned it on a side a little bit so I can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. There we go. All the way. And these pre-fit bushings are really nice. They're a joy to use. And last one. There we go. Perfect. Now the keeper plate goes on here. That's the bit we'll assemble next, and we'll put the pulley on. First of all though, we've got to find the bungs to put into here, because this is where I washed out the oil ways. So we've got to put that on, and then the sprocket will go over the top. Now I'm a bit pooey with the oil, but I don't mind that so much. One interesting thing about cam bushings, can't help it, I don't know why I've got an itch there. One interesting thing about cam bushings is this. When you have low oil pressure, the pressure in a block is created by resistance. And as I say, resistance is futile, but in this case it's very important. You've got bushings or bearings around your crankshaft, and also bearings on your camshaft. Now if any of those are worn, oil, and especially hot oil, is going to take the path of least resistance. So what I was going to say was, on these motors here, this is a very similar block to a 300 TDI, and it's an ideal opportunity to tell you that on this with a chain and a self-tensioning chain, we never had a problem with the bushes. But because here, which was for the cam, you could actually tighten the belt on a 300 TDI up so much that it would pull the cam down, it would force it against the bearing too much, and you could get a groove in the bearing. And the reason why you would have a groove in it, let's see if I can push this out again. Let's turn this engine around a bit. Can you see this here? Bloody camera's covered in oil. Right, you see that groove here? Well, oil pressure comes up from the block, from the crank, through a drilling up through here. You'll probably be able to, just to say, see a piece of casting here. That's why it's important to put this plug in. But the oil weir will come up here, through this bushing, and the oil will go around this groove and come up here, and there's a hole in the top of the head, or there used to, well there is on the 300 TDI, there's a hole in the top of the head. Now on these engines here it's blanked out, so they must have actually known that this block was going to be used sort of for a 300 TDI type of head. The oil feed on these 2.5s, or 2 2.25s, was at the back of the block here. Doesn't really matter. But, so what I'm trying to say is, oil can get round this engine in all manner and means of ways. But the problem is, if you've got anywhere in bushings, the oil is going to find its easiest way out, and you'll drop oil pressure. Now, a lot of people just put new bearings in the crank, and they think that's it. But you can still have wear in the cam bushings that can lower oil pressure. On these old 2.5s and 2.25s and things like this, these engines in particular were notorious for the rockers to wear, the bushings in the rockers. And what used to happen was you used to have your little rocker going up and down in your shaft, and if it was concentric, you know, like with the hole, it was all right. But with the pressure of the spring pushing it up, you used to get wear at the bottom and a great big gap at the top, so oil would come through the tube and let oil out of the top, and therefore you lost oil pressure. So when you've got low oil pressure, you've got to check just about everything and make sure it's right, because you only want one little opening, and the oil will just find its easiest way out and lower oil pressure. It's kind of important. Right, I've put these through the ultrasonic cleaner, and they've been hot. These are the bungs for the front. They've got a screwdriver slot in, and they go in here and here. This oil passage here is drilled for lubricating all the tappets. So what we're going to do, belt and braces, going to put a bit of Loctite on them, or thread guard or thread locker, whatever you want to call it. Put a bit of that on, take out a very old screwdriver and screw them in, because Can you see this? These are a parallel thread. They're not a taper thread. Try not to get them cross-threaded either. Such a bloody big screwdriver. Oops, there we go. You don't want to go too wild with them. Like that. And then we do the same with the other one. Loctite on them. Screw them in. It's a little trick. If you're not sure if a thread is going to start, you know, you can't get it kind of started on these fine threads, turn it backwards until you just feel it click, and then turn it forwards, and then you'll be on the right thread. That's what I was trying to do there, and I found it straight away. So we'll screw this in, and then we'll come back. On this one here, I've screwed it so it's just under flush of this face here. The reason for that is the tensioner goes on the top. This one just can stand out proud a little bit. Now we can take our centre punch, not on the screwdriver slot, but between the plug and the body. Give it a couple of pops, and that will set those plugs so they won't come out. Alright? They won't vibrate out. That's why I put a bit of Loctite on, just to be sure. The next thing we're going to fit is, where have they gone? Oh, I haven't picked them up. Where have they gone? The next plugs we're going to fit are these at the back. They've got a little copper washer on these, but in the kit, which was from India, there's a bag of washers, there's a magnet, and look at this. There's nothing in there that's steel. Oh, there is one big steel washer. What the hell is that one for? So wait a minute. What the heck's this one do? Steel washer. No idea. But the rest of them are pretty good. So that's a good sign, isn't it? So we'll take those. I think they'll unscrew. I don't know. I might have to get a pair of side cutters and cut those off. Right, now we're going to fit the plugs in the back of here. There's one goes in here and one goes down there next to my hammer that I don't need. Put that up there out of the way. Again, I'm just going to put a bit of Loctite on, thread locker, just to be sure. Now screw them in. Now it has got a sort of a screw-on washer, but they were proving to be a bit tight, so I'm a bit weak this morning. Now the spanner size is 13/16. There you go. And we'll just nip them down. Here you can see the plugs. There's one for the cam and there's one for the back of the head. They're exactly the same all round on this particular block. I think the other ones was called a Welch plug, which was flat. They were hopeless. Very difficult to change this plug if the engine's in the car, but you can actually drill through the bulkhead and get access to it and knock it out. That's how we used to do it, instead of taking the head off, or taking the engine out, because that was really the only way to get them out. Really, take the engine out. Well, do it properly, but put a hole in the bulkhead and put a plug in, and it was fine. We need a socket for this one because it's somewhat recessed. Oh, maybe not. There we go. So that's that done. Let's look around the front again.